Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 850, July the 27th, 2019, Saturday. Thank you so much for tuning in this morning. Okay, we have a lot to get to, so let's go ahead and jump into it. As most of you probably read, if you read any stories yesterday, you know that the Penguin, Jerry Nadler, is asking a federal judge to unseal grand jury information related to the Mueller investigation. I highly doubt if that is going to happen. I highly doubt it. That would be an extraordinary thing if it were to happen. But an Obama liberal judge, who knows? But you would generally have to show a really, really good reason. In other words, some sort of crime, which you actually have evidence that there may be probable cause or reasonable suspicion that a crime may have been committed. There is none. We have just been through this entire fiasco. But as I said in yesterday's video, it doesn't matter. As I said in yesterday's video, the only purpose of having Uncle Bob, the drive-by executioner Mueller, come in and testify was to justify the press conference that happened afterwards by the demo commies. Because their plan, which has been drawn up weeks and weeks ago, Mueller was just part of the plan. Having Mueller come in and testify was part of the plan. The plan, in case you haven't figured it out yet, is to continue on an impeachment route without actually being impeachment hearings because they don't have the votes. So what's the Penguin going to do? They've had 3 votes now for impeachment. They all have failed miserably, including the most recent one that only had, I forget what, 80 Democrat votes or something. So Nadler realizes that he does not have the full support of the House, even all those Democrats. I mean, if every Democrat would vote for impeachment, they would have certainly got it. But there's a whole lot of Democrats that couldn't go for it. So Nadler realizes this is a problem. So what's he going to do? Well, he's going to conduct impeachment hearings without actually calling them impeachment hearings. And he's going to do it through his committee, where he and 13 other Democrats can control the committee. So he is going to try to do an impeachment process through, or I would call it more of a pre-impeachment process, through his committee, knowing he cannot get it through the full House, hoping that he can find a few things that he can cherry pick in this sort of pre-investigation that he can use to try to bring on the number of Democrats he needs to get it through the full House. But here's the problem with all this. 2 problems. Even if he succeeded, even if Nadler succeeded and he found some hidden diamonds in the rough, he found something, and he's not going to find a report, that's already out, but let's just say that he would be successful in getting an Obama-appointed judge who would actually do something that would be extraordinary and serve up those grand jury, unseal the grand jury stuff, give that to Nadler. If he even did find a few things, then he would be creating a major problem politically for the Democratic Party in 2020. Because what he would then be doing is saying to the full House and all those Democrats, okay, now I've got this evidence, so now you have to come on board. Well, let's just say even if he had something legitimate or something that would be good, which he won't, and I'll explain why in a second, but let's just say, for example, he does find something that he could use to motivate some of those Democrats. The problem politically for the elections in 2020 is that you have about 70 some odd Democrats who won races in the last midterms who are in states, either red states where Trump won big, or purple states, which are very, very close, in districts where a lot of these races that these Democrats won, they won by literally 1% or less. There's a lot of those races were won by very, very, very close margins. And so he would be putting these Democrats who just won these seats into a very difficult position. If they side with Nadler and try to sign on to this, they're probably toast in the 2016 elections, because the next thing that would happen is it would then go over to the Senate, where Mitch McConnell would kill it. He would kill it. It would be a fail. But even if they went through with the hearings, it would be a massive fail, and probably worse. and probably worse. And the blowback would be immeasurable at this point. So it is a lose, lose, lose situation. There's just no way for Nadler to win here. None. But he's possessed. I mean, the man is literally possessed. I mean, this thing might kill the guy. I don't know. I mean, it's just like he just cannot accept things. And he's out there lying. I mean, he's not going to get away with it. I mean, he can go have a little press conference and lie. But once he gets into the full vote of the House, and there are floor speeches and various other evidence brought forward, he's going to get slaughtered. And those Democrats he's going to be counting on, they're not going to be able to get behind him. But even if they did, and it goes over into the Senate, they will be destroyed. Now, keep in mind, in the background, going on while all this is going on, you've got Barr and Durham hot on the heels of the real criminal conspirators, and listening to Giuliani and Lowe and DeGeneva and some other people over the last week or so, it sounds like that Barr and Durham are really hot on it. In other words, they're fast tracking it. They are not looking for a long investigation. They are looking to get to the bottom of this as quickly as possible. They're moving very, very quickly. This is what we're hearing. And it's very likely that before the end of the year that they're going to pretty much wrap up most of what they need in order to come out, have the press conference, announce the fact that they found the crimes, that they found that this entire investigation was launched. It was launched without a predicate crime. And there were many other crimes committed around that in the whole 9 yards. So Nadler can continue doing this, and he can continue to try to subpoena people, but people are not going to answer the subpoena. They're going to fight the subpoena. Then Nadler has to go to court. This is all going to take, I mean, the path that Nadler is following is a path that would take months and months and months. People are going to fight. He's going to have to fight for every subpoena. He's going to have to fight for every document. And let's face it, the grand jury information that he's wanting could very likely and most likely will be more damaging to him than helpful. If it was helpful, it would have been used by Wiseass and the Hillary donor posse and Uncle By the Drive-By Executioner. Obviously, the sealed grand jury information wasn't anything that was good enough for the case that they could go forward with the case and charge Trump with obstruction or collusion or anything else. There's nothing there, or they would have used it. But Nadler wants it anyway. And it very, very well, in fact, most likely, will actually be more damaging than it will be helpful to Nadler. There is no way to win here. It's a political loser. It's a legal loser. It is a loser from A to Z. But Nadler is hell-bent because he lives in a district where he'll never see a Republican challenger. And the Democrats would likely not challenge him because he's too senior in his position there. So, I mean, he can continue on with this, but, like I say, in the next couple of months, while he's fighting tooth and nail in the courts to get this grand jury information, he's fighting to compel people to submit to the subpoenas and all this other thing. We're not that far away. Probably, I'm hearing from DeGeneva, from Solomon, from Giuliani, from Lowe, that probably before the end of the year, Barr and Durham are going to have pretty much what they need to move forward with indictments, and the whole 9 yards will come out to the press conference. They'll announce what their findings were, and then, of course, that's when the whole thing will blow up. And at that point, everything that Nadler is trying to pursue will be have been proven to have been a farce and a hoax. And he'll be left looking very stupid. Not that he doesn't already, but I mean that's where it's going. I mean this is it's a freak show circus. This is what we're watching. We're watching a freak show circus, and Jerry Nadler is driving the clown car. I mean it's just amazing. I have never seen a political party commit suicide like this before. I mean I've seen it. I've seen some bad things, but you go back to a lot of these types of big politicals. I mean, the Clinton impeachment. I mean, Democrats didn't drive the bus off the cliff for Clinton. Even Al Gore really didn't come out and give a solid defense of Clinton's activities. They all acknowledged, even during the Clinton impeachment stuff, they all acknowledged that Clinton, yeah, he lied. He did have these relations and this and that and the other thing. The only thing that they tried to do was shift the focus to, yeah, but he's doing a great job. Yeah, he's got some moral issues. Yeah, he's got some issues with this, but that's between him and Hillary, and he's doing a great job running the country. This was the only defense that they had. They never came out and tried to defend Clinton's actions. Just they tried to justify them by saying, well, you know, that's just Bill Clinton, and that's between him and Hillary. But he's doing a great job as president. So, so ultimately, that's how they handled it. And you can go back to the Iran-Contra hearings. You can go back to Watergate. During Watergate, same basic thing. But, you know, once the evidence came out, the Republicans came to, they pretty much, they never really defended Nixon, if in fact he'd been involved in all this. They defended him on the basis that there's no evidence. But once the evidence was brought forward, that it was likely that he was involved in this and that and the other thing, that's when the Republicans went to Nixon and said, hey, you know, it's, you know, the tapes are out, and they're damning. You know, you're done. I mean, the conversations are there. It's pretty damn obvious, and you got to go. You got to resign. So, there's a way that these things work themselves out, and ultimately, just as Trump tweeted out, the truth is pretty powerful. And so Nadler is swimming upstream. He's swimming against a very strong current because the current against him is the truth. He's swimming against the current of truth. And he's not a good swimmer to begin with. Although Nadler might float. I don't know. He may float. The penguin. The penguin may float. I don't know. The floating penguin. But the man is completely out of his mind. Out of his mind. And apparently, Pelosi. Now, I think Pelosi must be wearing two faces here because she's obviously in a tough situation. And it appears that in front of the camera, when she's talking just to the press by herself, and she's got like centrist type Democrats behind her, she has one pitch, and then when she's in a hearing or in a press conference with Nadler and Schiff and those guys, she's someone else. Then when she's talking to the press about the four horsewomen of the apocalypse, she has one attitude, but then when she's with them or has to comment on like this meeting she had with AOC, she has something else. So she's being stretched in like 8 different directions, and she looks also, it's making her look like she's nuts, which she is as well. So, but she's not as nutty as she is nuts, but she's politically astute and she knows how things work. So she's trying everything she can to try to somehow stitch together her party, particularly in the Congress. I can't say outside the Congress, but within the Congress, she's trying to keep that party stitched together, and it's not together. There's a big division, and ultimately, what Pelosi is hoping for is to run the clock out. That's the strategy she's playing. Run the clock out. Continue to go out and say that she's on board with Nadler, while being able to go somewhere else and say, well, you know. Yeah, the president's horrible, and the president did all this stuff, and blah, blah, blah. We're going to continue to investigate, and once we get the goods on him, then we're going to go for impeachment, knowing good and well that will never, ever happen. She can run that line from now until 2020, and she knows it. And that's the card she's going to play, because that's the only card she's got. It's the only card she's got. So, anyway, what you have going on right now with Jerry Nadler is essentially a de facto impeachment hearing, but he knows he can't get it going through the entire House, so he's doing it with the committee that he heads, this judicial committee. He's got 13 Democrats. There's only like 8 or 9 Republicans there. So he is going to try to work this just using his committee and hoping that he wins in court, which I don't think he will, and getting the unsealed grand jury stuff. I don't think he's going to win, but let's just say he does win. Even then, he's still, at some point, he's got to take it out of the committee and go to the full House. And that's where the whole thing turns into a nightmare. And that's where Pelosi likely steps in. And she may have told him, okay, Jerry, here's what you can do. You can conduct all this bullshit you want in your committee, but it can't go outside your committee, because if it goes into the full House, you're going to force about 70, 72, 73 Democrats who are in very vulnerable positions to have to either vote with you and lose bad in 2020, and we lose the seats in the Congress, or they're going to vote against you, and you're going to look like a fool. We're all going to look like fools. The base is going to be pissed off. There is no way to win here other than to do what Nadler's doing. Keep it contained within his committee and try to drag this on, knowing good and well his chance of success is very, very low. There you go. That's my analysis on the Penguin. Well, fortunately, Congress has gone on vacation for the next 6 weeks. Fortunately, Mr. Barr and Mr. Durham have not. So normally, this is the time of year in Washington where everybody vacates. Everybody vacates. The politicians leave, which means the journalists have nothing to cover, so they leave. Everything in Washington, D.C., it becomes pretty much a ghost town normally this time of year, but not this time, because there's just too many things still going on in Washington. So you are going to basically have a lot of things still going on in Washington. I doubt that there'll be actual official hearings, because that would require the speaker or whoever to call people back and things like that. I don't think that will happen. Pelosi likes her vacations way too much. So I don't think like that, but I think that there will be things going on behind the scenes, and there will still be court filings and still be things like that happening. But as far as official Congress business for the next 6 weeks until after Labor Day, that's the next time that we'll see these freaks back. And it won't be long after that till we're going to be hearing from Mr. Barr and Mr. Durham, and this whole thing is coming down. It may come down before that because of another story that I've been looking at here for the past couple days. So anyway, you can your bank accounts are safe, your tax rates are safe, your freedom is safe for about 6 weeks, but they'll be back and will be in jeopardy again. The Gateway Pundit, they're reporting that John Durham is focusing on the transcripts of recordings made by a government source, who met with Papadopoulos. The recordings show exculpatory evidence that was withheld from the FISA court, according to Gateway Pundit sources. Fox News has also been told by their sources that this is a smoking gun. This is exactly what Trey Gowdy was talking about. Now, some of the sources are suggesting that what we may be talking about here is transcripts that will show that Papadopoulos never said anything to Alexander Down the Hatch Downer about the Russians having dirt on emails, having dirt or emails or anything else, and that the conversation or topic of Russia did not even come up, which is exactly what Papadopoulos has stated. It also would tell us that Alexander Downer was working in an official capacity, and that he just wasn't some guy who bumped into Papadopoulos in the bar, as we've been led to believe. Of course, we know that meeting was set up in the whole 9 yards, and it appears that that was not just Downer and his secretary, as they've been trying to say, that what happened was Downer sees Papadopoulos' article in the British paper and decides, hey, who's this guy? Tells his assistant, call Papadopoulos and set up a meeting with him, and so I could chew his ass for jumping on David Cameron. This is kind of what we've been told at this point. But now, if you believe what we're hearing in the rumor mill, that was an official situation with Alexander Down the Hatch Downer and Papadopoulos. Downer was officially working in some capacity for FBI, CIA, someone, British intelligence, hard to say who, maybe all the above. And that in that conversation, which was recorded, and the transcript, there is a transcript of it, and it's going to show that Papadopoulos said is exactly telling the truth when he said that he doesn't recall ever discussing Russia, emails, anything like that in that meeting with Down the Hatch Downer, which would mean that Downer has massively perjured himself, because he's claimed that Papadopoulos told him this, and that's why he went to the Australian authorities, who then forwarded the stuff to the FBI. If we have transcripts, just like Trey Gowdy said, that show that in that entire conversation with Papadopoulos and Downer, that never in that conversation did Papadopoulos and Downer ever discuss anything about Russia or dirt on Hillary, then that throws a tremendous problem. It also answers the question as to why the Mueller report places the date of Papadopoulos speaking with a Australian official, who we all have assumed at this point that they were describing Downer. But if you look at the date is not the date that Papadopoulos met with Downer. The date is the date that the assistant for Downer contacted Papadopoulos, which means in the Mueller report, or maybe in their investigation, they're going to try to say that no, Papadopoulos didn't tell Downer. He said something to Downer's assistant when they set up the meeting. And whether or not there's a transcript of that, I don't know. And Papadopoulos I've never heard him comment on that, but as far as I can tell, he never discussed that with the person who set up the meeting for him. So I think that this is what they're talking about, and yes, this would be bombshell. This would be absolute bombshell, and it would certainly point the finger at Australia and Mr. Downer, and they would have a lot of questions to answer, because the official story that's pretty much been sold to everyone at this point is that Downer says that Papadopoulos told him, and he's done multiple interviews on TV where he said exactly that. Yeah, I'm just sitting there talking to Papadopoulos. All of a sudden, out of the clear blue sky, he brings up Russia and Hillary Clinton emails and blah, 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 blah. And that's what he said over and over again. If we find out that there's a transcript of that conversation between Papadopoulos and Down the Hatch Downer, and it never comes up, Russia, Hillary emails, or anything else, Downer is going to have a lot of problems, right along with his government, who's been hiding this information, right along with Andrew Wiseass and the Hillary donor posse and Uncle Bob the drive-by executioner. They're going to have to explain it. And the way they're going to try to explain it is the way that they did that little trick in the report by getting the dates mixed up, leading you to believe that, oh, they just got the dates mixed up. They're like 8 days off. No. They didn't get the dates mixed up. They knew that Papadopoulos never said anything to Downer, so they used the date of when Papadopoulos spoke with Downer's assistant to set up the meeting to suggest that's the official that he said something to. And there may or may not be a transcript of that. And maybe that's what they're... So they allow the public to believe that it was Downer, but they're prepared, if they're called on the carpet for it, to say, oh, well, if you look at the dates, we weren't talking about Downer, look at the date. We were talking about the phone call with his assistant. Now, whether or not there's transcript with the assistant, I don't know. Maybe there was. Maybe they destroyed it. Who knows? But there's a lot of stink. There's a lot of stink going on around this, and apparently this is going to be coming out. That's the next story we're going to be talking about. So, John Solomon is on the Sebastian Gorka show, and he is saying, this was just 2 days ago, Solomon tells Gorka that he's hearing from his sources in the Department of Justice that Bill Barr, who has full declassification authority, is preparing to declassify a lot of things and release them in the next 2 to 3 weeks. The next 2 to 3 weeks, we could be seeing a lot of releases of declassified information. And it would have to do, obviously, with, the interviews. There was many interviews done. And I don't know if they're FBI interviews or congressional interviews, but I don't know specifically what they're talking about. But that's what Solomon is telling Gorka. 2 to 3 weeks from now, his source is telling him there's going to be a bunch of stuff released. Then we had Jay Sekulow, Trump's lawyer, who was on with Sean Hannity, and he said that the final statement he made to Hannity before going off the air was, he said the case against Trump is over and the investigation into the investigation begins now, suggesting that he, Jay Sekulow, Trump's attorney, and the other attorneys are now going to turn their focus on investigating the investigators who tried to frame Trump. So now we don't just have Barr and Durham doing their investigation and Lindsey Graham promising he's going to do something. But now we have the president's lawyer, Sekulow, who's damn good, by the way. And he and Giuliani have a lot of other evidence that they told Hannity that no one else has even seen or even heard of. Hardcore evidence that no one's even seen or heard of, that they're sitting on. And they're going to go after even more. And Sekulow told Hannity with a lot of confidence that you better believe it. He said tomorrow begins the investigation into the investigators, and we are going to get to the bottom of it. And he will have access, you can be assured that Sekulow will have access to all of the declassified information that Barr now has control of. He says it's going to be investigated, and we are going to find out what happened, what really happened. Then, of course, I mentioned the other night about that interview on Lou Dobbs with DeGeneva and Tensing. I watched it again. I watched it one more time just to see, kind of get a feeling for whether or not DeGeneva and Tensing might be just embellishing things a little bit. But after watching that interview, I'm more convinced that they were not. And in fact, if you watch that interview to the very end, you'll see at the very end of the video, unless someone clipped it early, which was the case in my case. The first time I watched it, it had been clipped early. Last night I saw another version of it that was not clipped early. And if you look at the very end of the video, just as they're going off, so Joe DeGeneva is saying, hey, look, people, he's hearing that people are, FBI officials, former FBI officials, are flocking back to the Inspector General, Huckleberry Horowitz, to modify their testimonies. And he said this has been happening since Durham was appointed, because they know that they perjured themselves or they either left out information. So now, since they know that Durham is on the case and they've heard that he is damn serious and he's after it, he's on it, that a lot of these people are now flocking back to Horowitz and they're recanting their testimonies. And that is why you're seeing these delays, is because lots of these people are coming back and finally coming clean because they know that they're caught up in this situation. And he says that they're flocking back to change or modify their testimonies. He also again reiterated that Mifsud has already been interviewed by both Horowitz and Durham. Now, again, as I said yesterday, I could believe that about Durham, but Horowitz, Horowitz did get the interview with Steele, but I'm not totally sure. I don't think Horowitz and his physical team went there. I think they used FBI people we already have. FBI people already in London, I think, conducted that interview. I don't think Horowitz himself did. So I'm not really sure exactly what to think about this, but, I'll take his word for it. But at the very end of that interview, just after DeGeneva has made this statement, and Dobbs is now thanking them for coming on, they're getting ready to go off the air, and his wife, Victoria Tensing, in a very excited sort of way, looks at Dobbs and says, hey, Joe, or hey, Lou, look, I'm telling you, trust us. Trust us. So that's what she said right after DeGeneva, her husband, said that Mifsud had been interviewed and that all these FBI agents are coming back to recant their testimonies since Durham has been appointed. There is another issue now that's starting to seep up, and that is that when Barr and Durham get done with their investigation and they prove that this entire thing was launched without any predicate crime, and that the entire thing actually, when Uncle Bob, the drive-by executioner, took over the investigation, it was at that time a counterintelligence operation. And it somehow morphed itself mysteriously, without any fanfare or being told how or why, it morphed itself into a criminal investigation. This is a real big problem that someone's going to have to explain, and that will probably be Mueller or Weissman or the other guy who was his chief of staff. But there is sort of, I guess you'd say, talk that once Barr and Durham expose the true crime that we know actually did happen, it's going to create a very, very big problem for Andrew Weisass, who is right now in the crosshairs because, as we talked about 2 days ago, he tried to bribe a Ukrainian guy who's being wanted on charges in Chicago for bribery. And Weissman went to his lawyer and said, hey, if you can get your client to give me some dirt on Trump, I'll make those charges go away, which he probably can't. The lawyers blew him off. The Ukrainian man blew him off. But now that's been established in the Austrian court. And now the Austrian court is wanting to contact the DOJ and say, hey, you got this prosecutor. Do you know what he did? Here's what he did. Well, we also know that Weissman is possibly looking at, there are people now looking at this, by the way. There are people looking at this, by the way, in the Justice Department. and they probably would not do this immediately because they have the other investigation going on, and they would like to have that investigation out and the facts out before they move on to the next thing. But the fallout, remember, I said there will be years of fallout once the truth comes out and the perps who are involved in the conspiracy are held accountable. Then you're going to have other things that were on the peripheral that they are also going to come into play, and one of those things that's going to come into play ultimately is going to bite Wise Ass in the ass, is that he could be held, and it's a serious charge, suborning perjury. In other words, he tried to force people to lie. Prosecutors are not allowed to force people to lie. They can motivate people to sing, but they can't compose something and then force someone to sing what they composed or have the book thrown at them. You're not allowed to do that. It happens. I'm sure it does happen. And Wise Ass has used this stunt. Of course, we know that that's how Jeremy, what's his name? Corsi. Durham Corsi was able to beat Mueller. Was the fact that he was able to prove that that's exactly what they did to him. Tell a lie or go to jail. And you saw how fast, once they was able to produce the evidence of that they dropped the charges against Corsi, and he's now clean. He's good to go. Because had he moved forward, and he still might, I don't know, he might still move forward, but literally, this is what Wise Ass did to everyone. He did to Manafort. He would have done it to Carter Page if he would have had anything on him. He tried to do it to Papadopoulos. So this is Michael Cohen. This is exactly what he did all throughout this witch hunt, as he tried to suborn perjury. And that's a very, very serious charge against the prosecutor. And it's very likely that once this all comes out, and the criminal conspirators, of which Weissman's also involved, because he was involved very early on, back in the summer of 2016, he was involved in knowing everything about the dossier and how it was all being moved around and everything else. He's up to his freaking eyeballs in this. Do not think that Andrew Wise Ass is just going to skip on down the path and he's going to escape the blowback. He's not. Andrew Wise Ass is going to be front and center in the blowback, and I'm sure that Barr and Durham are looking very, very hard at the activities of one Andrew Wise Ass. He's got a lot of problems, and I think he knows it. So, as is always the case whenever you have something like this going on, a lot of people want to know, how are we going to know when we're getting close? How are we going to know when it's about time for the axe to fall? How are we going to know when Barr and Durham are ready to drop the hammer? You know, is it going to be leaks, or is it going to be this, is it going to be that? Well, yeah, there will be a lot of that. There'll be leaks, there'll be talk, there'll be rumors, there'll be all these sorts of things. But there's one guaranteed way to know inside D.C. when the shit is about to hit the fan. And the way that you know that is when the defense attorneys in D.C. Start getting a lot of phone calls and they are all booked up, no vacancy. When you start seeing the no vacancy signs in the windows of the best defense attorneys in D.C., you know that it's about to hit the fan. Now, Paul Sperry is watching this very, very closely. So are other people in Washington, John Solomon and others who know how this thing works. It's one of the key things that they're all watching. They're watching to see who is seeking out legal defense from these high-paid defense attorneys in D.C., and they're watching very closely to see who's going forward and looking for legal defense, and how busy these people in the legal defense business in D.C. are. And that's when you'll know that we're very, very close to the shit hitting the fan. That's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. You guys have a good afternoon and weekend. Thanks. Bye.